It was a quiet Saturday morning in early summer. Sunlight poured through the windows of a large white colonial-style house in Chestnut Hill, a fancy neighborhood near Boston. Elizabeth Collins stood by her bedroom window, looking out at the blooming white roses in the garden. Her mother had spent the whole year growing them, just for Elizabeth's wedding bouquet. "Are you ready?" called Amanda from downstairs. The wedding was only a week away, and today was the final makeup rehearsal. "I'm coming," Elizabeth called back. She turned to check herself in the mirror, but her mind drifted. She thought about how far she had come. Elizabeth worked hard to become a sales director at Prestige Realty, earning a solid income of $85,000 a year. Her father was a high school teacher, and her mother had always stayed at home, so Elizabeth had built her success with no shortcuts, all on her own. She had met Robert 3 years earlier at a real estate seminar in Boston. He worked as a vice president in the investment banking division at Goldman Sachs. He said he had been instantly drawn to her intelligence and beauty. After dating for a year, he proposed at a quiet restaurant by the Charles River. Everything had seemed like a fairy tale. Downstairs, her younger sister Amanda sat anxiously on the couch. Amanda was a nurse at the local hospital and had always leaned on Elizabeth for support. Since they were kids, Elizabeth had looked out for her. Amanda was going to be the maid of honor at the wedding. "I don't feel so good today," Amanda said softly. "Did you skip breakfast again? You haven't looked well lately," Elizabeth asked, concerned. "No, it's not that." Amanda's vague response felt strange, but Elizabeth just smiled and tried to stay cheerful. The bond between the sisters had always been strong. She didn't want to ruin the day. "Let's go out for brunch after the rehearsal. It'll help." The doorbell rang, and Robert arrived. With his confident smile and a high-paying job, making over $150,000 a year, he was known for his charm. "Good morning, my love," he said warmly, kissing Elizabeth on the cheek. "Careful, you'll mess up my makeup," she teased. He chuckled, but Elizabeth noticed something odd in his expression, something a little too tense. "Mind if I come along for the makeup trial? I have to talk to the venue staff anyway." "Sure," she replied. Out in the backyard, their mother Margaret was busy tending to the roses. Their father James sat in his study reading the paper, occasionally glancing out at his wife with quiet admiration. After 35 years of marriage, they still looked at each other with love. Elizabeth hoped to have that kind of relationship one day too. Everything was going according to plan. The wedding would take place at a beautiful old church just outside of Boston, with a reception afterward at the Four Seasons Hotel. There would be 150 guests, fancy food, like lobster salad and roast beef, and a stunning 5-tier cake. Elizabeth had her mother's pearls, a new wedding dress, and her grandmother's tiara. She even had her something blue ready. It was supposed to be the perfect day. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Sunlight streamed through the colorful stained glass windows of Trinity Church in Copley Square. The light filled the bridal suite with a soft rainbow glow. The church, built in 1877, had seen many weddings, and now it was Elizabeth's turn. She sat quietly as the makeup artist finished up. "You're such a beautiful bride," the artist said. Her mother smiled proudly. Elizabeth looked elegant in her white wedding gown, lace on the top, crystals along the bottom, made of soft silk that flowed perfectly. She wore her mother's pearls and her grandmother's tiara. Everything looked magical. "Do you have your something blue?" Margaret asked. Elizabeth smiled. "The garter." Amanda showed up late. She looked pale and unwell in her light pink bridesmaid dress. "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling right." Elizabeth frowned, worried. Amanda had been off for weeks now. Everyone thought she was just stressed about the wedding, but something wasn't adding up. "Amanda, are you?" Before she could finish, the church organ began to play. The wedding march echoed through the stone walls, and the ceremony began. The church was full. Colleagues from Goldman Sachs, clients from Prestige Realty, friends, and family all filled the pews. Elizabeth walked slowly down the aisle with her father, roses and baby's breath lining the way. Her father's arm trembled as they walked. The rainbow light from the stained glass lit the aisle ahead. At the altar, Robert stood waiting in a sharp navy tuxedo. He looked perfect, but as the ceremony went on, he kept glancing nervously at Amanda. His hands shook slightly when he spoke his vows. Elizabeth tried to tell herself it was just nerves, but deep down, something didn't feel right. The rings were exchanged, and the ceremony ended. Cheers and applause followed the newlyweds out of the church. I need to rest a little before the photos, Amanda whispered in the limousine. Elizabeth looked at her in concern. Amanda could barely sit up. Robert, sitting across from them, looked tense again. Something was clearly wrong. The reception took place on the top floor of the Four Seasons, with views of the Charles River and Boston Public Garden. Everything was perfect: white tablecloths, rose centerpieces, sparkling chandeliers. The main table was ready for the bride, groom, and their families. Guests smiled and took photos near the entrance, excited to celebrate. No one had any idea what was coming. Then it happened. Just as Elizabeth walked toward the head table, Robert grabbed her arm tightly. "Don't sit there." "What? Why?" she asked, confused. "That seat belongs to Amanda," Robert said loudly. His voice sounded cold. "She's pregnant, with my child. I'm sorry." The room went silent. Amanda stood up, tears falling down her face. The reason for her strange behavior and poor health was finally revealed. Everyone froze. Elizabeth's parents were shocked, but Elizabeth didn't cry. She just smiled. Calmly, she picked up a glass of champagne and walked to the center of the room. She stood tall and proud. Her smile didn't waver. Guests whispered to each other in confusion. Some stared in disbelief. Her co-workers, Robert's friends, even her own relatives didn't know how to react. "This is insane," James shouted, standing up. His voice echoed through the hall. He was always calm, but now he was shaking with anger. Margaret sank into her chair, her face pale with shock. Elizabeth touched her father's arm gently. "Stay calm," she said softly. Her hand holding the champagne glass didn't tremble at all. "How can you smile?" her mother asked, her voice broken with sadness. "Because," Elizabeth said, her voice too bright, "this is entertainment." People turned to look at Robert's parents. They looked ashamed, eyes downcast. Robert's mother, Patricia, whispered, "Robert, is it true?" But Robert didn't answer her. His eyes stayed locked on Amanda. "The baby is his," Amanda said, placing a hand on her belly. Gasps filled the room again. And just when the tension couldn't get any worse, the doors to the ballroom burst open. "Wait, I have something to say." Everyone turned to see a young woman in a fancy Hermès dress rush in. Her eyes were red from crying. It was Janet, Robert's secretary from work. "You lied to me, Robert," she screamed. "I'm pregnant too." Now the room was completely still. Robert looked horrified. "Janet, what are you doing here?" "I'm carrying your child," she said through sobs. Amanda let out a cry and sat back down, shaking. The beautiful wedding day was now a public disaster. And yet, Elizabeth stood in the middle of it all, calm, elegant, and unshaken. The day that was supposed to be the happiest of her life had turned into a nightmare, but she refused to fall apart, not in front of them. Not today. "I thought I was special," Elizabeth whispered. Janet gave her a mocking smile. "You were lied to, just like me. Robert and I have been together for 3 years. Then Janet reached into her expensive handbag and pulled out a photo. "This is my ultrasound from last week. I'm pregnant." Robert Wilson, the successful Goldman Sachs banker who made over $150,000 a year, was suddenly the center of a dramatic storm. 3 women's lives had collided because of him. Amanda, his sister-in-law, who was pregnant with his child. Janet, his secretary, also pregnant. And Elizabeth, the woman he was about to marry, betrayed on her wedding day. The room went into complete chaos. Amanda broke down crying. Robert stood frozen. But Elizabeth stayed calm. She quietly took a sip of champagne, her face unreadable, like a character in a tragedy. She leaned in and whispered to her best friend from college, who sat beside her. Her voice was soft, but full of calm power. From the tall windows of the ballroom, Boston sparkled below them. The Charles River flowed gently in the distance, a quiet contrast to the storm inside the room. Anger, shock, and sadness swirled among the guests. Robert didn't say a word as Amanda and Janet started shouting at each other. His cool, confident look was gone. He was just a man caught in the mess he made. The master of ceremonies tried to speak, clearly unsure of what to do. "Ladies and gentlemen, given the situation." But Elizabeth stood up slowly, cutting him off. The room fell into silence. Everyone stared at her. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes were calm, cold, determined. She walked to the center of the room, her beautiful silk dress catching the light The long train of her gown moved behind her like a wave. She looked more like a queen than a bride. Amanda looked terrified. Elizabeth turned to her and asked softly, "Amanda, did you really think I didn't know?" Her voice was no longer warm like a sister, it was sharp and serious. "Do you remember that Thursday?" she asked. Robert's face turned pale. "You came home early that day," Elizabeth said. "You said your meeting ended early, but you forgot your phone." Everyone in the room stared at Robert now. "The battery was low, so I plugged it in for you," Elizabeth continued. "That's when I saw the message, from my dear little sister." She pulled out a photo from her clutch. It showed a phone screen. Her hand holding it shook slightly. The message read, "Let's tell her about the baby at the wedding, then big sister will have to give up." Amanda looked like she might faint. Her pink bridesmaid dress couldn't hide her guilt. "I've known for a while," Elizabeth said, "but I stayed quiet on purpose. Want to know why?" She turned to Robert, locking eyes with him. "My smart fiancé, the one with the six-figure salary, the man who got my sister pregnant, and cheated on me with his secretary." Robert tried to speak. His voice was weak and full of fear. "Elizabeth, let's talk about this." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "Oh, now you want to talk?" She reached back into her clutch and pulled out a stack of papers. "These are the invoices from the Four Seasons Hotel. The total cost of this wedding is $75,000. She looked around at the shocked faces. "And guess what? I changed the credit card for everything, the venue, food, flowers, dress, to yours, Robert, 3 days ago." She sounded like a businesswoman giving a presentation, calm, sharp, and in control. "My plan was simple: expose the liars in public, hit you where it hurts, your wallet, and make sure everyone sees who you really are." Janet's voice shook. "But, why do this at the wedding?" Elizabeth's voice finally cracked with emotion, a mix of sadness and anger. "Because I wanted everyone to see your downfall. I waited for the perfect moment. I've been planning this since I saw that message." Amanda clutched her stomach. Her guilt was clear in her body language. Elizabeth looked around the room, filled with Robert's coworkers, real estate clients, social elites, and her own family and friends. A camera in the corner kept recording. "Thank you for watching this little show," Elizabeth said loudly. Her voice was clear and powerful. "And I hope it becomes a memory none of you forget." People began laughing, soft at first, then louder. Applause followed. Elizabeth's revenge had turned into a performance, and her audience was amazed. She calmly took off her wedding ring and placed it on the table. It rolled across the surface, making a sharp sound. Then, standing tall, she walked toward the door like a runway model. "Wait," Robert shouted. He looked nothing like the man he once was. "Without you, my future." Elizabeth turned back. Child support for 2 women, a $75,000 wedding bill, a ruined reputation in front of your bosses. That's your future now. You made your choice. Her father, James, walked up to her with tears in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked. Elizabeth smiled softly, her first real smile of the day. "Yes, I have a career I built with my own hands. I'm the sales director at Prestige Realty. I earn $85,000 a year. I don't need a man to survive." Amanda cried. "We're sisters." Elizabeth's eyes turned cold again. "Yes, we are. That's what makes your betrayal worse. Move out of our parents' house. Grow up." With that, Elizabeth walked out the hotel doors. A taxi was already waiting. She had planned everything. Inside the room, nobody said a word. Finally, someone whispered. It was like watching the perfect revenge drama. And it was, but it was more than that. It was a woman standing up for herself. A bride choosing dignity over shame. A victory born from pain. 6 months later, Boston's Back Bay district. Inside a bright office overlooking the autumn trees of Commonwealth Avenue, Elizabeth sat at her desk, smiling. She had just finished reviewing another contract. "That's 15 property closings this month," she said to herself. She had quit her job after the wedding and started her own company, Collins Real Estate. Many clients followed her, trusting her skill and strength. She was now making more than double her old salary. Her secretary, Kate, a former co-worker from Prestige Realty, walked in. "Here are the new property documents," she said. "Thank you," Elizabeth replied. "By the way, was the rumor true?" Kate nodded. "Yes, Robert quit Goldman Sachs. Elizabeth looked out the window. She had heard the stories. Robert had lost the company's trust. He was drowning in bills and child support payments. And Amanda? She asked. She moved into low-income housing. She left her hospital job. I think she's working part-time now. Their mother sometimes called Elizabeth, asking her to forgive Amanda, but Elizabeth had made up her mind. Kate interrupted her thoughts. A new client's here to see you. It was an executive from a major developer, one of Robert's old clients. Miss Collins, your reputation is well known, the man said. That wedding incident, it's famous now. Elizabeth smiled politely. To him, it was a juicy story. To her, it was something she had survived. Later that evening, Elizabeth had dinner with her boyfriend, a kind, thoughtful professor from Columbia University. You're so strong, he told her with a warm smile. It's not strength, she said, swirling her wine. I just wanted to live life on my terms. Outside the window, the Charles River flowed peacefully. But this time, there was no pain in her heart. Only peace. The best revenge, Elizabeth whispered, was finding my own happiness. And that was her true victory. Not just revenge, but rebirth. The start of a new life, one she had built with her own strength.